saw you record it. Because when you sent that email, I was like, when did you record this?
Oh.
I didn't see the laptop until now.
I hide it up there. Okay, so today's lesson is part of the mindfulness program, and this one is actually all into the awakening of the consciousness, okay? And the Introduction to Gnosis program, this is class number 11, okay? And so, just a little reminder of where we left off as far as what is the consciousness, okay? And last week we said in another way, Samuel Vore explains that people confuse the consciousness with intelligence or the intellect, okay? And he says, we affirm that the consciousness in man is a very particular type of apprehension of internal knowledge, totally independent of all mental activity, okay? So the consciousness, or in other words, awareness, is a state of being, okay, that is beyond intellect, okay? I love the way that Eckhart Tolle explains it also in this quote. He says, thinking and consciousness are not synonymous. Thinking is only a small aspect of consciousness. Thought cannot exist without consciousness, but consciousness does not need thought to exist. Okay. So in other words, this is why you will see in Buddhism, for example, in the Zen tradition, they try to teach you how to quiet the mind, how to reach that state that is beyond thought, or a thoughtless state. Okay. And so, because beyond thought, there is something else. There is what we call consciousness. There is awareness, okay? Free, unconditioned, okay? And when we're able to awaken or connect with that aspect of ourselves that we call consciousness, then we can begin to see the world in a new way, okay? And we can say in an unconditioned way, unconditioned by the ego, and we can begin to see the objective reality of life, okay? So from the spiritual traditions, we are told, or we're invited to reflect on the fact that we don't actually see life objectively, right? Each one of us has a different perspective or a different concept about what life is, okay? And so, spiritually speaking, there is one objective reality. There's one objective truth. There's one transcendental meaning to life. Even though we all have different concepts, we're always invited to see that there is one true aspect of life, or one true purpose of life. Okay, and so when we awaken consciousness, we begin to realize the same things that all of the different spiritual masters in history have realized, right? And so when we begin to study all of the conclusions, all of the experiences that all of those different masters had, we begin to realize that they all came across this one universal truth, right? The Buddha, Jesus, Hermes Trismegistus, Krishna, they were all teaching the same thing. Because they were able to reach a state of being, they were able to awaken their consciousness and connect with the truth, or with oneness, or with God, whatever we want to call it, right? And so when they awaken consciousness and they reach that state, they all realize, oh, this is the purpose of life. This is the meaning of life, okay? Or in other words, they reached an objective experience of the truth. And I say objective because we know that many different spiritual masters that never had any contact with each other all came across the same teachings, right? So that points to this idea, as we talked in the lesson 9, the universal mind, that there seems to be one universal consciousness, okay, one universal truth, and we have the ability to tap into that, okay. And so the way to do that is through mindfulness, okay. The way to do that is by awakening our consciousness, okay. So consciousness is awareness, okay, or like Samuel Vore says, is a particular type of apprehension of internal knowledge. Okay, it is a state of being that's very particular. It's a state of being in which you are apprehending knowledge about yourself. Okay, and as the Greeks say, men, know yourselves and you will know the universe and the gods. Once you begin to know yourself, you begin to understand the world outside of yourself, right? So let's get right into something that we call the 4 states of consciousness, okay? Because in order to awaken consciousness, we have to first learn what state of consciousness we are at. Hey, Joe. What's up? Hey, man. What's up? Welcome. I think you can close the door now. Is anyone else coming?
One person might come.
Oh, yeah? You have a
Yeah.
guest?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. I think I'm going to go. Hey.
Hi.
There's one chair over here, and that one's mine. Oh, but your friend can sit there, I guess. Yeah, I can take another chair. Okay. So last week we also said that even though we are here with our eyes open and your physical body is awake, that does not mean that you are awake from a spiritual sense, okay? Or you're not, we can say, consciously awake, okay? So we can say that the human machine is awake, but it is on autopilot, okay? So in Gnosis, we make a clear distinction between what it is to be consciously awake and, let me say, unconsciously awake, okay? Because as you'll see, all of the different spiritual traditions and scriptures, they all invite us to awake. To awake to what? Okay? So, awakening is a word that's thrown around a lot in spiritual circles. Okay? Most of the time, what they mean by awakening to something, they refer to having information about something. Okay? So a lot of people say, "Oh, I've awakened to this," and then they tell, "Yeah, I came across this information that, I don't know, like let's say sugar, right? I've awakened because I know now that sugar is not very good for you, at least not in the amounts that we usually take in our diets, right?" And so they will say, I'm awakened in that sense. From a spiritual sense, we say, no, you just acquired information, okay? That, sure, it might expand the concepts that you have about life, but it does not necessarily mean that you're consciously awake, okay? So what is it to be consciously awake? Before we can understand what being awake is, we have to understand the 2 previous states of consciousness. So Samuel Wimber explains to us that there are 4 observable states of consciousness within us. Okay, the first state is referred to as the state of sleep. Okay, and this is usually experienced when the actual physical body is asleep. Okay, so there is unconsciousness, hallucinations, we're dreaming. Okay, in this state, your mind is basically projecting desires. And that's basically what we do during dreams. We're just projecting desires that have been either repressed, okay, or you're very attached to. Okay, those are most dreams. There are different types of dreams, and of course we'll talk about that as well, because there are certain types of dreams in which we can receive messages, we can receive visions about the future, about ourselves, about we can get answers into our problems, etc. Okay? So that's the first state. The second state is referred to as the waking or vigil state. Okay, and in this state, the mind is predicting the future. Okay, or we can call this daydreaming. Okay, your physical body is awake, But for example, now if I'm talking and you are thinking about laundry and the way that you're gonna get back home, you are dreaming. You're not here presently engaged in the future. And I mean in the present, sorry. You are projecting yourself to the future, or you can be thinking about the past, right? So you're still like in this dream world, even though you're physically awake. Okay, so that is what we call the waking or vigil state. Okay, there is complete identification with the external world, or with your own thoughts. Okay, in this state of being, the circumstances control us. And this is something that we talked a little bit last week. Um, the external circumstances of life define who you are, right? So again, if we bring that example of you being a Yankee fan, and then you see a Mets fan, then you get upset, right? If they just lost, okay? So why do you get upset? Because the external world is telling you that you should get upset at this moment, okay? Someone comes here and starts insulting you, you get upset, right? And so then the question is, who's in control of your life? Who's in control of your emotions? Because emotions and thoughts is what creates your life, right? As we explore this concept in lesson 2. The external world is a reflection of the internal states. If you've read about the law of attraction, that's also a concept that's thrown out there a lot. Under this concept, you attract everything to your life. Things don't just randomly happen, right? Every single person that you meet in your life, you are attracting in some way or another. Okay, whether it's a good person or someone that hurts you, you attracted that somehow, right? And so that is what happens when we are under this state of being, okay, in this second state of being. You are basically attracting circumstances to your life, and those circumstances affect you in a positive or in a negative way, okay? But you have really no control over that, because you have no control of your reactions. You know, like nature, for instance, if it rains, you have no control over that. Some people get happy when they see rain, some people get upset when they see rain, right? Why? They have different concepts about that. You can say that maybe they're both asleep, maybe they're both in that waking state, okay? Okay, so basically the main difference is that here your body is asleep, here your body is awake, but your conscious self may not necessarily be awake, okay? And so then that leads us into the third state of consciousness. In the third state of consciousness, we call this the state of the awake state of consciousness, okay? And this is also called self-consciousness, okay? There is comprehension and awareness of our immediate reality, okay? And then we begin to be in control of ourselves and, of course, of our lives, okay? We are aware of our inner and outer reality, okay? So, and then the fourth one is kind of like the even beyond this one, which is referred to as objective consciousness. This is the state of consciousness that most awakened masters possess. Okay, people like Jesus, the Buddha, Hermes, Krishna, etc. Okay, people in history that have had or have seemed to have a totally different aspect of consciousness. Very wise, illuminated, right? Okay, so in this state of consciousness is when we actually begin to know ourselves and to know the universe and the gods, right? To know life objectively, okay? And so the purpose of this lecture is to help us go from this state into this state, okay? And for that, we have to work with the mind, because the mind is what, or the way that we use the mind helps us become awake or asleep, okay? And you can see this clearly when you sit down to meditate. Right? As soon as you sit down to meditate, you begin to realize how your mind is just kind of running the show. But we have to begin to identify ourselves with that which is beyond mind, which is our true self, consciousness. Okay. So, objective consciousness is complete or cosmic awareness in our three realities. And I say three realities because in the spiritual sense, there are these three realities. There's the physical, there's the psychological, and the spiritual. Okay? And so the physical reality, once we begin to awaken our consciousness, we begin to see objectively this three-dimensional reality. And then we also begin to see our psychological reality, and we connect with our spiritual reality. Okay? And what's more important is that in Gnosis, we try to align those three realities. Okay? So that, because for most people, the spiritual life has nothing to do with your financial life, or with your, with the life of the personality, right? But from a spiritual perspective, this physical life has a purpose, and you begin to understand that, to comprehend that once you begin to align yourself with your spirit, with your higher self. Okay. Okay. So here we begin to actually be in control of our own lives. We begin to be in control of our emotions, of our thoughts, and of our actions. Okay. In the fourth state of consciousness, our higher self is in control. Okay. So that's why I put here that the being is in control. And in this state, this is a continuous consciousness. Okay, it is a continuous state of awareness, of self-awareness. Okay. So let's give a little example of what awareness is. Okay, as we did last week. Okay. So what is awareness? Awareness is your ability to feel, to sense, to perceive something in a given moment for a particular amount of time. Okay? And so last week I gave the example of, I said, if right now I tell you to become aware of your right foot, okay? All of a sudden, what happens? Your attention goes to your right foot, and you can actually begin to sense and to feel your left foot, right? Whereas before I pointed out, you knew that you have your right foot there, but you weren't aware of it. You weren't feeling it, right? And the same way, we can say that we're not aware of ourselves completely. We're not aware of our entire physical body. Are you aware of the state of your physical body in this moment? Take a moment to experience it. Is your body tense? Is any part of your body tense? If it is, why should your body be tense? There is no logical reason why any part of your body should be tense in this moment. Why? Because your life is not being threatened right now, right? Your physical body only knows two states: the fight or flight, or the relaxing or growing state. Okay? So basically, your mind is always telling your body, okay, there's nothing going on right now. Life is safe. You can just walk around normal. There's no need to become tense, right? And then the other state of the body is the fight or flight, in which there's or we are perceiving some threat to our life, and then we become tense. Your nervous system tenses up because it wants to collect energy to do whatever it needs to do to survive, right? So it's like, you can call it a survival state or your neutral state, okay? And so, again, let's become aware of our body. Let's feel the entire body. Let's feel your heart, feel the muscles of your stomach, feel your shoulders, okay? Become aware of that. Become aware of your breath, How many times during the day do we forget to actually breathe consciously? 97% of the time, most likely, or 98, or 99. All right, and so as we begin to practice those little exercises in mindfulness, you begin to increase awareness of self, right? So you begin with your right foot, then with your left foot, then with your legs, then with the rest of your body. Then you begin to realize, okay, well, I'm tense. Why am I tense over here? I should loosen this part up. And when you begin to loosen up, when you begin to relax, what happens? Your sense of awareness begins to expand. And your cognitive capacity actually increases. This is one of the scientific results of mindfulness and of meditation. They actually have now corroborated the fact that when you begin to practice mindfulness, your IQ goes up. Your brain actually begins to, or you give your mind, you give the brain more time to process even more information. Got a question?
Yeah, no, I actually just read this last week that they say that with 6 weeks of meditation consecutively, they've proven that the gray matter in your brain actually increases.
Right.
So you can focus more, memorize patterns better, like all this stuff. Control your emotions better.
Right.
Just 6 weeks. And you start to see physical changes in your brain.
Right. Yeah, that aspect, that topic of gray matter is very interesting.
Yeah.
It's gray matter is related with what Kathy just said, and also imagination and decision making. So the more gray matter that you have in your brain, the more, I don't know. Let's see. You have a better chance of making better decisions, right? And that's due to the fact that your brain can relax more. It can take time to process more information, right? When you're anxious, when you're in a stressful situation, and your mind is stressed, your ability to process information narrows down, right? And try to have an argument with someone that's upset, right? They can't see from many different perspectives. They're stuck in their perspective, right? And so if they were to practice mindfulness, if we're to practice mindfulness in those states, we can begin to actually see more about life, more about that, okay? This is why we talk about, or Samuel says that consciousness has 3 degrees, okay? And I think I mentioned this last week as well, so it's a little bit of a review. But the first is time. How long was your consciousness awake, okay? So getting back to the example of the foot, how long can you maintain awareness of your foot? How long can you maintain awareness of the breath, for instance, right? And so that has to do with time. How long were you actually awake in that sense? Awakened consciously, okay? Frequency is how often during the day are you actually conscious, okay? And again, you might think that just because you're walking around and your eyes are open, you're conscious, right? But in the spiritual sense, we're making, or we are more critical about what consciousness is, okay? So sure, you might be in the waking state most of the time, but how often during the day have you actually been consciously awake or spiritually awake, okay? And then amplitude and penetration, which is what was I conscious of, okay? How much of that which you were observing, which you were studying, were you able to grasp, were you able to become conscious of, right? It's like sometimes we read a book, right? And you become conscious of a message in a degree. And then you take that book and you read it 5 years later, and you've acquired other experiences in life, and now you understand that book in a new octave, right? So the same concept, the same idea, now you understand it in a new way, in a I don't want to say better, but you understand it more fully, right? And so that's what we're talking about when we say amplitude and penetration. Okay, what was I conscious of? When it comes to behavior, when it comes to psychology, this is what we're mainly interested here. Is you might be able to become conscious of a behavior that you never thought you had, a pattern of thinking that you weren't aware, and then now all of a sudden you become aware of it. Okay, and then next week or 2 weeks from now, you become aware of another level of that. Okay, you begin to see how that aspect, how that thinking pattern affects other aspects of your life besides the one that you were just focused on, right? And so that all has to do with being conscious, with amplitude and penetration. And so what we're trying to do here is to little by little increase the time of during the days, the times during the day in which we are actually conscious. Increase the time of consciousness when the consciousness is active. Okay, to go from like a few seconds of being conscious of myself to a minute to 5 minutes, etc. And then to increase the amount of times that we're actually conscious during the day, that we awaken consciousness, and to increase our ability to process all of that information. You had a question, Danny?
No, I was just when you asked how long, I thought about the goldfish.
Oh, the goldfish example.
Every day I've been trying to say 7 seconds, and then I'll just do the exercises,
right.
And then I'll suddenly realize it's like almost as if my mind is cheating me. I'm like, what would happen? And I don't think I could do the 7 seconds, even though I feel like I am. I don't know.
Yeah, it's see how much you can try it out with, like if you're listening to a lecture, a recorded lecture, see how long you can go listening objectively, attentively to that lecture before a thought comes in and takes you away. A lot of the times, like we're listening to, you guys are listening to me right now, and I could say something, and right away your mind says, oh yeah, it's like, I've heard this over there, bro, and then where are you? You're not here anymore, right? Or when you're reading a book, how many times have you read a whole chapter and then have no idea what you just read? You have to go back, right, to read more consciously. Why? Because when you were reading, you were thinking about laundry, I always bring that example. I don't know what my obsession is with laundry. But or, the conversation that you're going to have with your boss or whatever, right? So, and you have to read again. And now this time, become conscious of that. And so you'll notice one important aspect of consciousness, which is attention, right? And this is where the whole example of the goldfish comes into place, because I said last week that goldfish have an attention span of 8 seconds. And they have realized that most people now in this society have less than that. We have about 7.7 something or 8 something. The joke was that a goldfish is closer to self-realization than human beings at this point, which is kind of funny, but it's not at the same time. Anyway, so how can we awaken consciousness? There's a very simple, it's not very simple, but a simple way to remember it, okay? It's something that we call the key of soul, okay? In Spanish, the word soul is sun, okay? But it's not referring to the physical sun, it's referring to subject, object, location, okay? So in a moment, we should be doing this all the time. We should be asking ourselves, where am I? What am I doing here? Who am I in this moment? Okay? Who is it within me that is perceiving life in this moment? Is it my essential nature, my true consciousness, or is it my egoic nature? Okay? That's the subject. Who? Object, what am I studying? What am I observing? Okay? And being conscious of that. Okay, and then the location is where am I. Next week we're going to talk about the spatial sense in the fourth dimension, because when we begin to awaken our consciousness, your physical and internal senses begin to expand, and so you begin to experience or become aware of more things about life that are beyond just the mere physical five senses. Okay, we can say that the spatial sense is also like the sixth sense, where you now begin to become aware of other dimensions of yourself and of the universe. Right. So we'll get into that next week. But when we begin to practice this key of soul, when you begin to question every moment of your life, where am I? What am I doing here? How did I get here? Who am I in this moment? How am I perceiving life? Okay? Then your consciousness becomes active. Okay? This leads into what we call self-remembering, which is mindfulness, and it's what we're studying in this course. And that requires a division of attention, as I was saying before, right? So attention is a very important factor in mindfulness. Okay, so we have to learn to train our mind to focus. Okay, this is why when you go to meditation classes, when you go to yoga, when you go to school, and you need to learn something, you need to focus your attention. Okay, and the longer that you maintain your attention focused on that thing, the more that you get of that, right? The longer that you can maintain your attention on me and what I'm saying, the more that you're going to get about the message that I'm trying to give you, right? The same as the example of reading a book, right? The more attention that you pay, the more that you get off of that, okay? But like I said, unfortunately, we have a very, very short attention span. And so what we're doing here in the first, or as a first step, is we're really trying to teach ourselves how to train our attention so that we can learn how to concentrate and then enter into meditation. Okay? There are 6 phases of meditation. The first is asana, which is related to the physical body, physical posture, and your ability to relax the physical body. Okay? The second is asana. The second is pranayama, which has to do with the breath. Learning how to wisely breathe, how to consciously breathe, how to use the breath as a source of not only vitality, okay, but also as a way to relax the physical body and relax the mind. Okay, the third phase is called pratyahara, which is abstraction of the senses. So it's our ability to detach a little bit from our external senses. Okay? So like when you're meditating and all of a sudden you begin to have an itch or your body wants to move, that is your senses that want your attention. And so it's your ability to detach from those senses for a little bit so that you can begin to sense more of yourself. Okay? And then concentration, which requires attention, and then meditation and samadhi. Okay, meditation is when you're actually, so meditation is really a state of being. Meditation is a state of being in which your consciousness is awakened. Okay, and this is why in this state you can begin to see thought beyond, you can begin to experience that state which is beyond thought. Okay, you can begin to experience life without thought. Okay? And this is nothing new to us, because whenever you are engaged in something, really into something, and you're experiencing, you're receiving that, you're in a completely receptive state, you can say that you're in a meditative state. Okay? You're in a state in which you are becoming aware of. You are experiencing and becoming aware of how whatever it is that you're observing is affecting you inside. Okay? So that's what self-remember and mindfulness is. You are becoming aware of yourself, you're becoming aware of the environment and the interconnection between, or the interrelation between the external environment and the internal environment. Okay, you can begin to feel the subtle changes that begin to happen when you begin to, when these things are coming into you, right? When these impressions are coming in. Okay, so this is a practical tool. You can begin to divide your attention. Okay, this is why in meditation we're always, or like I said before, when you go to any meditation class or yoga, you're always asked to focus your attention on something. Usually it's the breath, right? And so that's really like the basic exercise. Focus your attention on the breath and see how long you can maintain your attention on the breath. And you will notice that the longer that you maintain your attention on the breath, the more consciousness, the more awareness that begins to manifest. You begin to feel more of yourself, more of the environment. Okay. Yes.
You can also do that with like, you can meditate with like a candle and focus on the flame. People do that too, right?
Mhm.
How's that different from breath? Like, is it...
It's no difference really. I mean, it is a difference, right? But I guess one of the main differences is that in the candle, well, there are like two practices with the candle. You're either just staring at the candle, or you can take look at the candle for a little bit and then close your eyes and try to maintain the candle alive with your imagination. So you're just referring to looking at the candle, focusing your
just both, like using it as a practice.
Okay. Yeah, it's different techniques to focus attention, to call upon concentration and consciousness. Okay, again, the longer that you're able to maintain attention on something, the more consciousness that you send forth. Okay, and the more consciousness that you experience. And this is precisely why we need to learn how not to be so distracted. Okay, so if you're walking, try to just focus on walking, on experience yourself walking, on feeling each foot touching the ground as you go. And as you feel the breath as you walk, and as you feel the breeze, as you feel the temperature, right? As you feel the different sounds that are in the room, right? That is all becoming conscious. That's all mindfulness. And the more that you do that, you'll begin to notice that you become more receptive to life, okay? And you also begin to become more aware of everything about yourself, your thoughts, your emotions, and obviously your actions, right?
What about meditating with the third eye? Is that the same like focus attention? Is that what they...
Yes. So, let's make a difference between meditating on something and focusing your attention on something. Focusing your attention on something will take you into the meditative state. So you can use your third eye as a point of reference to focus your attention there, and as you maintain your attention and your third eye, you begin to enter into a meditative state, and you will begin to immerse yourself or become aware of that third eye. So meditating on the third eye implies that you need to focus on the third eye. And then meditating on the third eye is experiencing the third eye. Okay, so meditation is a state of being in which you're experiencing that which you're focusing your attention on. Okay, so if I'm meditating on life, I will feel life, I will experience life. If you're meditating on your psychology, you will begin to become aware of your psychology. But in order to do that, you need to focus your attention on it first, right? That makes sense? Cool. So if you want to meditate on consciousness, what is consciousness? Then you have to bring your attention to consciousness. What is consciousness? Or how do I experience consciousness? Well, you bring your attention to that which is beyond thought, as Eckhart Tolle says, right? You begin to try to experience yourself in between thoughts, okay? And that is where consciousness is, okay? So we'll do a little practice, or that's what the practice is going to focus on, right? How to awaken consciousness during the meditation, so that we can begin to do it in our lives, right? And eventually, of course, meditation is, when we sit down to meditate, it's kind of like a controlled environment, so it's easier for you to experience it. But the whole point of this is so that you can not just reach this third state of consciousness when you meditate, but when you're walking, when you're active in life, right? And that's what they call mindfulness. So if you can be mindful 24/7, that would be magnificent. You will experience yourself in many new ways, and you become more joyful, more loving, more kind, more compassionate, more happy. Okay, I think I've talked enough. Do you guys have any more questions or comments before we go into the practice? All right, perfect. Okay, cool. I'll put this here in the chair. That's for you to read. Take down the leaves. Cool, you're welcome. Oh, and before we I have this that I was going to read to you guys last week, but I forgot about it. Oh. I guess this died. I know I have some matches here somewhere. There we go. So a great way to practice mindfulness is through silence. Okay, and this is why in the Zen tradition, for instance, the main thing is silence. They try to teach you how to connect with silence, because when you connect with that state of being in which there is silence, silence of the mind, silence of the emotions, and no activity physically, you can begin to connect with consciousness, with your higher self. Okay? And that requires observation, that requires listening. So,
When you're meditating, right, how do you